3 off banks in the WTO.
Yep. First off, the states our interpretations of that should specify the agent, the term United States is worthless, not the federal government of the states, is ball of wax, Mag 14 is more than the federal government of the United States either. Is the United States, the whole ball of wax is. The limits we're already debating 5 topics that can also specify different aspects of federal, state, and local governments, and possibly neg B is precision, which level of government takes legalizing makes a world of difference. Can't learn about this topic otherwise. C is ground any agent counterplan loses competition when an ambiguous term like United States becomes our actor. Next off. The affirmative orients this debate with the taken for granted structure of neoliberalism, where the promise of equal opportunity substitutes for and displaces a critique of economic ideology. Davies, 2005. An illusion of individual autonomy is created within neoliberalism. Over and over again, individuals are required to collectively invent the neoliberalism. They are part of making sure each time that they come closer and closer to the correct discourse. Reconciliation is all the rage in universities. The new certain future can be attained by careful planning within the terms of neoliberalism, with the promise of implementation of equal opportunities means of institutions previously disenfranchised, put energy into generating any neoliberal discourse of the future. The neoliberalism as we currently practice it, as it has shaped up as a movement from social conscience and responsibility towards an individualism, in which the individual is cut loose from the social from under critique to define this criticism in terms of rules and regulations combined with the individual's vulnerability to those rules and regulations, which in turn rest toward conformity of the group, and the DSM mechanism locks in the perception of procedural fairness at the level of the WTO. The plan legitimates the only mechanism that WTO has to inoculate itself from the criticism that it is a mechanism for wealth transfer from the global subaltern. Bellow, 99. The WTO serves primarily the interests of the United States. The U.S. Republic wished to bring service under the WTO coverage with its assessment that its corporation has led to that we needed to be preserved the strong WTO dispute settlement mechanism serves U.S. interest because we limits the full weight of the international machinery to go after those of the trade barriers. The WTO is a real blueprint for the global hegemony of corporate America seeks to institutionalize the accumulated advantage of the U.S. corporations. The necessity of the WTO is one of the biggest lies of our time. By taking liberalization and systemization as an unfettered human good, the one team perpetuates colonial violence. Even their modest attempt to construct the WTO as a lesser evil locks in global fascist inequality. Khalid Patel and McMichael, 2004. The crisis of emerging market rules that are premised on the defeat of third world utopianism on the event of globalization, combined from the decline of unorganized labor, global labor marketization on peasant cultures and public goods, the capitalist cultural technologies with their origins in Europe have now under US ages have been extended over under multilateral development institutions, and I them as of necessities about these rules of it is successfully to claim its goal interested in normalized universality, and the affirmative does not record the reign of the global north and the WTO as part of the story of globalized economic violence. Instead, they record the WTO and its trade dispute mechanism as a means to reproduce economic opportunity. We reject their opponents who record that the global trade regime is one of violence, not equality. McMillo, 2007. Rhetoric journey under the time for rhetoric of salvation, the good for all life, for all. Unfortunately, not all the massive killings have been recorded with the same value and the same visibility. Unspoken trade for the value of human lives is an obvious sign of the hidden imperial identity policies. That is the value of the human lives to which the life of the enunciated belongs becomes the measuring stick of value to other human lives who do not have the intellectual option and institutional power to tell the story and to reclassify the events according to it, ranking human lives. And the alternative is a critical dissent from neoliberalism. We must engage in a process of counter-consciousness continuously and cumulatively. It is the only way to solve the socialization of neoliberalism. Serrano, 11. We all inherit beliefs and ideologies that need to be critically understood and transformed for such transformation happen for years. This practice and ideas dialogue with the ongoing relation between theoretical understanding and critique that seeks to transform individuals and their environments. We act as the subject must continue to move from action to revelation, from reflection upon action to a new action. The consciousness is the manner by which a society and its development explains the world and then views itself. The counter consciousness, thus achieving the consciousness that breaks away from the imprisoning logic of capitalism and the quality of its counter consciousness will thus depend on the level of intellectualization of those who think for and on behalf of the forces for change. And next up. The United States Supreme Court should rule that WTO agreements and decisions of its dispute settlement panels are self-executing. The U.S. should comply with any WTO ruling. The United States federal government should define and ban all online gambling with U.S. or foreign corporations. This solves court action to enforce the TSB rulings and reinvigorate international constitutionalization of WTO law and restore WTO credit. O'Halloran, 2008. What about giving U.S. courts the unilateral ability to enforce the WTO Act so that opposing all parties could have the right to sue the government and go to court for non-compliance to the court? Good. Remedy such violations without needing the approval of Congress. The court will make a difference, and exactly those cases where they will be at odds with at least one elected branch of government. The treaty obligation, including WTO law, are legally binding on all organs of the contracting parties and not by U.S. courts of the legally binding nature of the WTO dispute. Someone's willing to provide pay local disregard for international law. The fact that U.S. governments have requested that their domestic courts respect government and dual interpretation of the WTO, even if legally binding WTO, the sovereign rulings have found that such a government interpretation to be in violation of WTO obligations reflects broader constitutional problems of WTO objective of promoting international law or the benefit of citizens cannot be realized without coherent conception and judicial process of international rule of law by WTO dispute settlements and findings of systemic distortion to world trading systems. For example, U.S. agricultural subsidies are not being implemented in the WTO legal and trading systems widely perceived as neither fair, equitable, nor just. Thanks. There's zero internal link of WSJ evidence has zero break. That was all in cross-X. Here are the four tenets of the middle ground of climate change. 1. Every single apocalypse has been exaggerated. There will only be 1 to 2 degrees of warming. Positive feedback to when humans can adapt. Ridley. 12. Number of negative apocalypses that played out is pretty good. The middle ground possibilities were too frequently excluded from consideration. Then have positivity of feedback and water vapor in their atmosphere are low. We face 1 to 2 degrees Celsius as warning this entry. The green line may have been melted, but no faster than the storm rate of less than 1% per century. Net by increases in rainfall and carbon dioxide concentration may improve agricultural productivity. That ecosystems have survived to some temperature illusion before, and that adaptation gradual change may be less ecologically damaging than a rapid and brutal decision to give a fossil culture. An example of this is malaria. Warming or more than accounting outright by pesticides, anti-malaria drugs, blood, or drainage, and economic development will combat ecological threats in the future by contributing to breathing them as serious, not through the massive fears of worst case scenarios and appeals to avert extinction and preempting and environmental harm for the good of us all. It lies distinction and distinct relationships in the environment between black and white bodies within American culture. White environmentalism is tied to a history of eugenics and dehumanization that ignores the physical and psychological violence done to non-white bodies. 14. This legacy went to white dudes to be black people as part of the natural world and their procedure to them with contempt and makes the possibility of complicating union with the natural world less readily available to African American students about race. With black people at the bottom, evolutionary wrong of trend, the emerging narrative with the eugenics movement and may want to make it mainstream and environmental organizations understandably disavow and need action to eugenics, but we cannot be the races the involvement key and environmental proponents of any evolutionary understanding about who we are. We do it by seeking to cultivate a sense of that natural affiliation by appealing to what is arguably our deepest human fear, extinction, Roosevelt and others were not able to justify the person that love for African Americans and other non-white people to people's systematically excluded, ignored, and erased, and metaphorically and literally believe that you can isolate one idea from another. Is the formation of a major movement is to deny first and damage that is occurred, and second, to understand that it is the police is the whole that if it allowed a certain action and practice to be legitimized as a result of the belief should be short by science belief, or be part of the foundation to use to achieve their goals for the good of us all in environmental policy. And so we call out whiteness in the ways that it affects environmental policy. The idea that environmental harm is universally affecting denies a deeper attention to power dynamics that maintain structures of violence. Finley 14. The universalizing determination of pain and particular ideas of wilderness and environments here purview of all Americans of series of its messy racial past that denies the role of power and privilege in determining what meanings are prioritized and what appearances are made invisible, while no group of people is monolithic is integral to this exercise about whiteness out in order to understand how race management, the development of environmental ideas and policies in the U.S. What is more important is to challenge the ideas of whiteness of recognition and vision as well normative, universal, and imagine the collective African American experience that there is not through the lens of the collective white experience that how and aware of their participation was different by the dominant culture of the legislation, rhetoric, science, and popular perception here starts with oversensitivity of alpha when we begin to accept the legacy of the American story. Do you want to keep reading or do you want to go to the other end?
Yeah, do the first armor card, not the second one.
Okay. Use of conflict discourse justifies militarism and imperialist foreign policy makes intervention more palpable. Or in 2010, the Pentagon entered the climate of very practice launching as an area that it impacts the derived climate change and losing a nightmare of course, starving population, showing an mass towards the United States and European borders. There appears to be very few environmental cells representing the perspective of less affluent countries. The beating of the climate of the conflict has been viewed in the conscience of the large devastation in the U.S. Imperial policy these trends that reflect a shift in the defense thinking towards a focus on the stability of operation to take one government spaces as security going on in these spaces are actually governed but not by groups that to the U.S. interest that Africa has been in the primary focus of the cities on sides with the establishment of Africa in very institutional structure represents the military civilian boundaries while it is unlikely that you what?
Market unlikely.
Market unlikely. Do you want to read the caption first?
Yeah, read down the card and go up.
Text vote negative to affirm the plan without the climate conflict justification that all solves better to tries 11. Making sure strategic links between climate change and security should be not be taken lightly after skin frame climate changes like security issue for strategic purposes. It is important to consider the different aspects that emerge from using one discourse over another, while most extent to use a combination of environmental conflict and environmental security discourse. These discourse stress very different elements of the impacts of climate change. Using the environmental conflict discourse may result in change creating climate policy designed to promote safety stability as a primary objective. This may lead to reducing our human vulnerability as a lower priority for climate policies. Here, realizing discourse has the negative implications potential to end up with positive and effective addressing human security need of those who are most vulnerable to change. Mark after change.
Are you good?
Yep.
Okay. Net benefits of the capital plan?
The yeah, all the warming stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so just the climate stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The piece of evidence that you read on the counter plan says giving U.S. courts the unilateral ability to enforce WTO rulings would be good. So does that mean that in every single case post the counterplan, the courts decide to like enforce the WTO ruling?
It means they don't need a Congress to do it. It means they do it on their own.
No, this evidence is like we should give Congress the power to unilaterally enforce them. Does that mean
No,
that
no,
post
no.
counterplan, every WTO decision that's made, the U.S. is forced to comply with because the
No,
court.
normally when we sign a treaty like
Okay.
that for the WTO, Congress has to make it executing, right?
Okay.
This says the courts can do it on their own.
Okay, ASPEC, cross-ex, we said we were the states. Why is this relevant?
We think it should be specified in the plan text for things like pre-round
We said the
preparation.
United States, and then we said we were the states.
I think the Magahan 14
How can you
evidence.
get more
Okay,
specific?
you're-
Magahan
you're
14
nice.
evidence
Let's talk about
complicates
the-
that United States and allows people to
Okay,
say it's the
cool.
United States federal government, it's the
Let's-
local governments, it's the state governments. That's a problem.
But we said it was. Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about the first link card. This evidence says that it says an illusion of individual autonomy is created within neoliberal systems. Why is this a link to the AF? This evidence is just like neoliberal systems make people believe they have the ability to change things and they don't.
Yeah, it's an indictment logic of the WTO, right? To try and just create a fair playing field where all the countries individually have their own autonomy.
I guess then
Things like your
I guess I
terrorism
have a better question
scenario,
then. What does the
that one.
alternative do to resolve the fact that people generally think that they have some level of individual autonomy?
It's a rejection of that belief.
How?
Well-
What does the alternative do to resolve the fact that lots of other people outside of just you and your partner
Well, one,
tend to believe they have some level of
independently, regardless of
individual
whether or not the overall system of neoliberalism is defeated or not defeated, the Bell evidence is that there are specific impacts that the WTO itself causes on.
So we're just not going with like you being able to resolve this link argument.
It's a counter-consciousness to what the evidence talks about. We need to push back against
Okay,
these
that's fine.
discourses.
Let's actually talk about the DSM link. The Bell evidence reads from 1999. It's talking about a different GATS agreement and a different DSB, and it also says the WTO served primarily the interest of the United States. The AF is saying that the U.S. has been ignoring the DSB, but we should start listening to it instead of just serving U.S. interests. Why is this relevant?
Well, sort of like the articulation on the China relations, the U.S. has the ability to use the DSB mechanism for its benefit. Secondarily,
Yeah, that's like the status quo, right? Our argument is that like we're screwing over the DSB
Yeah.
and being like we don't care what you say, but now we're going to help the smallest country
Yeah,
that's having a dispute
that's why
against
the
the
Davies
biggest
evidence
country.
is kind of important here. It seems like it's not in the U.S. interest because we're creating an equal playing field. The Davies evidence indicts the notion says an equal playing field among
Wait,
countries
wait.
isn't actually equal when countries have more economic power.
The Davis evidence isn't about the WTO. The Bellow evidence is the one that's about the WTO, and it's just like the U.S. doesn't listen to the WTO. It should stop doing
The
that.
Bell evidence says that the reason the U.S. benefits is a very strong
Because
economic
we
power
ignore the
benefits from
DSP.
suddenly creating an equal playing field among countries.
The Bellow evidence is like we ignore the DSB. The U.S. should stop doing whatever it wants.
Right,
and
so
listen
we
to the
have
national
jobs in
community.
industries, so we don't
Okay.
let small countries protect industries
Okay.
develop in their own countries.
Alright.